High Anxiety is definitely a very funny episode of The Golden Girls. It's actually addressing quite a serious topic, but it manages to do so in a way that's quite funny but very powerful. This is the 20th episode of the 4th season of The Golden Girls. This is directed by Terry Hughes, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And this one starts off with Dorothy making malt. And I had my first laugh out loud probably less than a minute into this, maybe a minute into it, because Dorothy was telling Blanche that she used to work at a malt shop when she was at school, and Blanche replies, "Soda jerk?" And I had to Google it, and that's the person who would work the soda fountain in a soda shop. And when Blanche said "soda jerk," Rose replied, "No thanks, I'll have a malted." Very early on getting that laugh there, really thoroughly enjoyed that. And Sophia comes in and establishes one part of the narrative, and that's the fact that she's actually going to be in a commercial for a pizzeria, and she's really excited about this. And she then tells Rose that she accidentally knocked Rose's pills into the sink when she was getting something out of the cabinet, and unfortunately, tomorrow is a holiday, apparently, so Rose isn't going to be able to get her prescription refilled for a couple of days. And we'll come back to that in a second. We then have Jay Thomas playing Cy. Cy is directing the commercial for the pizza restaurant, and Dorothy's actually going to be in it now as well. And it's going to be filmed in Blanche's kitchen, which doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know why you wouldn't film it in the restaurant that you're advertising, but that's where they want to film it. I guess they're trying to go for that kind of homely, homemade vibe, which I guess makes sense. And Blanche was also getting $1,000 a day, so she's quite happy. But Rose is busy in the kitchen, and when they come in, she snaps at them, and she's really blunt and honestly unnecessarily mean. And I think it was very apparent immediately that this was a response to her not having her medication. And we learn that actually Rose took those pills for an injury to her back that she had back in St. Olaf 30 years ago. She's been taking these painkillers for 30 years, which for me is a strange concept. I don't know if it's still the same in the States or if this is a product of its time. And if anybody can provide that information, please feel free to share. But in the UK, I feel like there's no way you would get a prescription for 30 years when you didn't need it. I mean, some might fall through the cracks, but in general, a doctor isn't going to continue prescribing something that you don't need. And if there are signs of addiction or dependency, they're probably going to signal you to support rather than continuing to give you the prescription. So on the one hand, the idea that Rose has had this prescription for 30 years when she probably only needed it for a couple of weeks, the injury doesn't sound too severe, is on the one hand not realistic, but on the other I have to accept that either it's a product of its time, or maybe in the States it's just easier to get an ongoing prescription. And if anybody has any information, please feel free to share. But either way, she's been taking these for 30 years, and Blanche suggests that maybe Rose has become dependent on them. And Rose is not having this. She gives them the pill bottle that's now being refilled, and she says, "No, I don't need them. Here, take it. I'll prove it." And the next thing we see is everybody going into the kitchen. Rose is in there making a clatter because she was looking for the pills where they'd hidden them. And what I think is quite interesting about this is that it wasn't a physical response. Well, I mean, there are physical symptoms, but it wasn't a physical pain she was feeling that made her want the medication. It was the anxiety of worrying about not having them, worrying what would happen if she didn't continue to take them, which I think is quite significant here. And they tell her, this isn't, you can't keep taking them. So they play a game that's like Monopoly, and they help Rose get through the night, and she does, and she manages. And it's a really joyous moment, and we'll come back to Rose in a second. The mood is lifted a little bit when we actually go to the pizza restaurant. They are filming, well, actually they're filming it in a studio, but it's a mock-up of the restaurant where they're filming this commercial. And I loved Dorothy in this moment because she and Sophia are sitting at a table, and Dorothy has to say that it's a real good pizza. And she can't, and she's struggling to get the words out, and she realises why. as a teacher, she can't in good conscience say real good because it's really good. And I absolutely love that because that's one of my pet peeves. So I had a lot of love and respect for Dorothy in that moment. She was then made to swap places with the waitress, and the waitress took her role, and Dorothy had to be the waitress. And Sophia took a bite of the pizza to say her line, and she called it a mighty lousy pizza. She'd never eaten it before. And to Sophia's credit, she could not put her face to a pizza she did not like. She's not doing the commercial anymore. So I really admire that. Don't advertise a product you've never even tried. And much credit to Sophia. She tried it. She didn't like it. She realized she couldn't do this. And I have a lot of respect for her there. We come back to Rose, and it's an interesting last couple of scenes. Dorothy walks in on Rose in the kitchen. Rose is clearly taking some kind of pill. Dorothy assumes it's the prescription, so she tells Rose to spit it out. And Rose initially insists that she can take it, but then she spits it out. Dorothy looks at her hand where the pill is, and she says, "This is Fred Flintstone." It was obviously a Flintstone vitamin, and Rose then admits that actually she's really scared to stop taking this medication. And what I love about this as well, and I'm not saying this has to be the way, but it showed a real strength of Rose's character in a time when she's feeling very fragile. Dorothy said, let me phone the recovery centre for you. And Rose said, no, the first step has to be me making that call. And I love that. Again, I don't think that has to be the case. If you're in a similar position to Rose and you need somebody else to make that first step for you, I think that's absolutely acceptable. But in an episode where we're seeing Rose being very, very fragile, to see that little bit of strength left in her, I thought was a really lovely moment, and she does. And we cut to a month later. Rose has been in the hospital for a month, and I love this as well because she comes back and they ask her if she's cured, and she said, well, she'll never be cured. It will be an ongoing battle, but she can do it. And I love that. I love the fact that they don't just advertise the fact that you can go to a hospital for an addiction, come out, get cured, everything is just perfect, because that's not how addiction works. And I really like that they kind of made that clear, and Rose was just so happy, and she was still herself and talking and talking and talking, and everybody else by the end of the scene were just kind of looking away. And it was lovely to see that even though she'd now come off of these pills with the help of professionals, she was still herself. And that's really lovely to see. I think they do a really great job of tackling a really sensitive, important topic, but still making it very, very funny. In fact, the funny moments in this are some of the funniest I've seen in a while. I laughed out loud on multiple occasions, and I really rather enjoyed that. So, needless to say, I thought High Anxiety was a very, very powerful episode. I think they handled everything very, very well, and ultimately, I'd say it's probably one of the strongest from season 4 so far. I still have a couple left of season 4, but it's a big contender, and ultimately it's a real credit to the show, and definitely an episode that I really thoroughly enjoyed.